Hi everyone! Today I'm going to share a really yummy recipe with you that I've been making for myself a lot lately, and I think you guys will really like it. So here are the ingredients. I've got one medium to large size head of Romanesque, one small to medium kohlrabi, one large, very ripe red bell pepper, a couple of Persian cucumbers, I've got about 3 cups of beautiful red tomatoes. Most of them are cherry tomatoes and a couple of them are regular vine ripened tomatoes. I've got about 4 stalks of celery, and I'm going to use a little bit of a fresh carrot and cut up the carrot so it's really fine. Just basically used a peeler and made really fine peelings of the carrot so that it's nice and soft. And I've got a bowl full of sun-dried tomatoes soaking in water, and I'm going to use 1.5 medjool dates for the sauce and a bowl of fresh sweet basil. This is what I would call a savory vegetable rice, and it's made with this beautiful Romanesque cauliflower. And these are becoming really popular, and I'm starting to see them in a lot of places. I get mine at the farmer's market, but I've also seen them at Whole Foods, and it's really cool. It's like a beautiful fractal. It's also known as Romanesque cabbage or Romanesco broccoli. It's a lot like regular cauliflower, but it's green, and it has a little bit more vitamin A and vitamin C than regular cauliflower, and it's also really high in potassium. The inside of the stem is actually really good. It's actually pretty sweet and crunchy, and so I like to add that in with the rice. So I'm going to show you how I make rice out of this. So when you peel away the outer skin of the stem, the outer skin is pretty tough, and so you just cut that part off, but save the inside because the inside's really good. So I'm just breaking up the pieces of the cauliflower and putting them in the Vitamix. I recently tried for the very first time kohlrabi, which is a vegetable that's wasn't very common in my family. My sister grew it in high school, and that's the only thing I ever remember about it. But other than that, I never tried it that I remember. But I recently tried it, and it's really good. It's kind of like a very sweet cabbage taste. And it has a nice crunch to it, and I find that it goes really well with the Romanesque or the cauliflower. If you're going to use regular cauliflower, it goes well with that as well. And I find that the smaller the kohlrabi is, the sweeter it is. The really large ones are not very sweet, but the small ones have a nice sweet crisp flavor. So if you are going to add kohlrabi to your rice, I would go with the sweeter one. So I've already cut up the kohlrabi, and I'm just going to throw it in here as well. And I'm only going to use about half of the Romanesque because this is going to be a really big meal. Okay, so I'm going to blend this on low to get it a real fine consistency. has a really beautiful consistency, and it's very much like rice. Now that the rice is made, I'm going to prep the sauce in the blender and get that going. So I'm going to put in my tomatoes. That's about 2 cups of tomatoes. Put in half of my red bell pepper. About 2½ to 3 stalks of celery, and I'm just going to chop it up really rough. This particular stalk of celery is so salty, and I love it. I love when celery is super, super salty. Sometimes you get one and it's not quite that salty, and I usually go for the really dark green celery because usually I find that that's much saltier. But this particular one wasn't quite that dark green, but it's super salty. It's great. So I'm going to use about 10 leaves of sweet basil. Sweet basil is my favorite. It is such a wonderful herb, and I love the sweet variety because it adds a sweetness to it, where regular basil to me tends to be a little bit bitter. So I really like this. And this is about the size of these particular basil leaves. So I'm using 10 of these and throwing those in there. And then I have some left over to be able to chop up into the rice when it's all done. And I'm throwing in 5 slices of these sun-dried tomatoes that are soaked and soft, ready to go. I'm going to throw those in. And I'm going to throw in 1½ medjool dates, pitted. Make sure they're pitted. So I'm just going to blend this up real quick and get it to a somewhat smooth consistency. I don't want it to be too smooth so that the flavors kind of all run together. I kind of like for this sauce to be a little bit on the chunky side, so I'm not going to blend it too smooth. Oh wow, yes, that is perfect. Really, really good. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside. And now I'm going to start adding my ingredients. So I am a huge fan of noodles, and I love cucumber noodles. And so I've made these fine cucumber noodles to add to my rice. So for me, this is kind of like a rice and noodles recipe. And you can use zucchini if you prefer to use zucchini. And you don't have to noodle it. You can slice it, dice it, do whatever you want, whatever you like. And I also am adding my celery. Adding the chunks of red bell pepper. And lots of tomatoes. I love fresh tomatoes, so I'm adding lots of tomatoes in the mix. And I'm adding my carrots. I'm going to dump off all the water from my sun-dried tomatoes. I don't want to add any extra liquid to the rice. I don't want it to be runny, so I'm going to drain the sun-dried tomatoes and squeeze out the water. And then, for ease and simplicity, I'm just cutting the sun-dried tomatoes into smaller pieces. I love the sweetness of sun-dried tomatoes, and they add such a nice flavor to this dish. Make sure when you buy your sun-dried tomatoes that they do not contain any sulfur, and make sure that they don't have salt, or that if they do have salt, make sure they're extremely low sodium. I've found that a lot of the sun-dried tomatoes that are available on the market are very, very high in sodium. So you want to be really, really careful with that. And also you want to avoid the ones that are in a jar packed in oil as well. Get the ones that are just dried in the sun or dried in a dehydrator. You can even make your own in your own dehydrator. And then you want to just pour some warm water over them and let them soak for at least 20 minutes, preferably longer. I let mine soak today for a couple of hours to get them nice and soft. So this is looking really beautiful, and it's time to pour the sauce over top. To mention, if you have sensitive digestion and you want to pay more attention to better food combining, instead of using dates, you can add something sweet like a mango, a subacid fruit. Works really well, like a mango, to sweeten up the sauce if you want it a little sweeter, instead of adding dates, because dates are sweet fruit and the tomatoes are an acid fruit, and typically those don't blend very well for food combining. So if you do have sensitive digestion, I definitely suggest using something else. Even maybe a sweet apple would help to sweeten it up and give you the flavor that you're looking for if you like a sweeter sauce like I do. This smells so good. The aroma and the flavor of this all blends so well together, and it smells like fresh from the garden. So good. Alright, I'm going to cut up some fresh basil on top. You can also modify this recipe to make it fit to your likes. So if you prefer using cilantro instead of basil, or if you would like to add both, that would make a great combination. You can also add chives if you wish. You can also add fresh corn, which would be amazing in this. I've actually had it with fresh corn before, and it's really, really good. But make sure that if you do use corn, make sure it's organic. You definitely don't want to be eating GMO corn. So this is the final product, and it looks so good. I have to try it. Very tasty. Wow, I love this. Also remember that the quality of the ingredients that you use are going to make a huge difference in the success of how your dish turns out. It's going to be really, really yummy if you use high quality, fresh organic ingredients. Make sure when you get your tomatoes that if they're not quite ripe yet, make sure you let them ripen on your counter until they're a gorgeous red, and that they're really juicy and delicious and have a lot of flavor. If not, your dish is going to turn out kind of bland and boring. So make sure you pay attention to the quality of the food that you bring home so that all of your dishes and all of the meals that you make are absolutely fantastic. I hope you like this recipe as much as I do. If you want to see more recipe videos like this one, please click the like button. And thank you so much for subscribing and for supporting this channel and for leaving your wonderful comments. I read each and every one of them, and even though I don't always have a chance to reply to all of you, as much as I would love to reply to each person, please know that each of your comments means so much to me, and I appreciate you all so very, very much. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. For a fun and gorgeously dynamic twist, add some fresh blueberries to the mix. It's beautiful and it tastes really good too.